The Debrief, an online publication, recently had an article talking about how the New Mexico is going to be getting the largest center for historical records ever. And it's appropriately in New Mexico. Of course, that's where the Roswell crash occurred. Anyway, here's the headline. We're going to go through this article. It says, nation's largest center for historical records on UFOs to be established in New Mexico. And we're going to read through some of this article. It's written by Micah Hanks. It says, the largest historical archive of records on unidentified aerial phenomena in the nation will be unveiled in New Mexico in the coming years, according to a group of leading UFO historians and archivists. The National UFO Historical Records Center, or NUFORC, will be dedicated to the preservation and centralization of UFO/UAP information in the United States, according to a press release from announcing the new nonprofit organization. Led by researcher and historian David Marler, the organization has announced its plans to have its archive housed at a facility in the Albuquerque, New Mexico area. Drawing from collections housed by several researchers from across the country, the National UFO Historical Records Center will feature documents from the collections of archivists Jan Aldrich, Rod Dyke, Barry Greenwood, Rob Swiatek, and several others. Notably, the organization's New Mexico facility will also house collections owned by the J. Allen Hynek Center for UFO Studies, following the transfer of files by its director, Mark Rodiger, Ph.D., to Marler in November 2020. Included with this collection are the personal files of J. Allen Hynek, the center's namesake, who served as scientific advisor to the United States Air Force's official UFO investigations for close to 2 decades, which, as we know, is Project Blue Book. Continuing here, it says, Marler is currently in possession of the files formerly maintained by the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena, NICAP, which at one time represented the largest civilian UFO investigative organization in the United States, and says that as many as a dozen more private UFO collections have already been promised to be delivered to the facility over the next 2 years. Let me just stop there for a second. Now, NICAP, of course, as some of you may know, that was headed by the late Marine Major Donald Kehoe, of course, who was the first major UFO investigator, who wrote several books back in the 50s, had a lot of inside connections to the Pentagon at that time, and was very upset that there was a cover-up, and he never got to see it. He never got to see the cover-up exposed in his lifetime. But anyway, continuing, here's a direct quote from Marler. It says, with the accumulated data, we hope to assist with serious research endeavors and aid in an accurate chronicling of UFO/UAP history for present and future generations, regardless of belief or non-belief in the subject. Marler, who spoke with the Debrief at length about the new endeavor, expressed appreciation for the renewed public interest in the UFO subject seen in recent years. What he says, here's another quote. It says, what I find, though, is that despite the ever-increasing amount of people that are looking at the UFO or UAP subject, not a lot of people, a very small percentage, are interested in the history. Everyone wants to know what's new, and part of that is due, I think, to the framework by which the intelligence community and the media in recent years has framed the discussion, this new discussion. Everyone seems to be looking at 2004 moving forward, Marler told the Debrief, noting that we know that this history is diverse and rich and stretches many decades back, if not even further. I'm trying to preserve the history of the pre-2004 era, Marler says, much of which the general public has not seen. Okay, let's just stop there for a second. Now, yeah, this is something that I've talked about before on numerous podcasts over the past year and a half. But the fact is that there are a lot of people that think that UFOs didn't start turning up until 2004. That's basically that year is when David Fravor and some of his other colleagues had witnessed the Tic Tac object. Now, of course, as we talk about, this goes way back. This goes back to the 1947 at least. As far as the military becoming very interested in UFOs, it really started in 1947 because that's when everyone's really started seeing. That's when they showed up in force. And there's been so much stuff that's happened over the decades, and it's really awesome that there's going to be one big central place for all this information. That's going to be totally awesome. And, I'm really thrilled about it. I'm glad that there's people out there like Marler who are, take this seriously. The history of this subject is very important. We need to have all the history, everything that we know, compiled in a place like this. There needs to be a central database, and this looks like it's going to be very impressive. And again, it's a lot more than just starting from 2004. This is starting from who knows when it really started, but since 1947, it's been a big deal, and there's been lots of different reports and lots of different encounters between military officials, and it's just so much has happened over the decades, and this is going to be the place to go, whether you believe in it or not. If you're looking for something, like he says here, it doesn't matter. Even if you're a non-believer, if you need to do some research with regard to something that has to do with UFOs, you could, maybe you're going to write some paper trying to debunk something. Well, this is somewhere where you would go, something that you would look to for possible information to assist you in whatever you're going to put together. And anyway, continuing here, it says, apart from historical documents related to UFOs from the United States, Marler says the new organization will also be home to records from countries in South America and other parts of the world, the inclusion of which will aim to provide a more diverse historical perspective on the subject and its global presence. Well, let's just stop there for a second. Of course, there's a global presence when it comes to UFOs. Everyone's seeing in every single country, there's reports of UFOs for decades now. It's everywhere. So it's good that it's going to have not just the United States, but everywhere else. Okay, here's another quote from Marler. It says, "We have a diverse history beyond just domestic United States case files," Marler told the debrief, noting that he is currently working with translators to produce English versions of documentation from Spanish and French-speaking countries. That is totally awesome. I'm just going to stop there for a second. See, there's a lot of stuff, you might not know about because it's written in a different language. Or you might know about it, but there's more information out there. But because you don't speak that language or you don't read that language, you can't get that additional information. That's awesome news to hear this. So this is big news for if you're interested in UFO history, I'm sure people like Richard M. Dolan, the author of the books UFOs and the National Security State, Volumes 1 and 2, those two best books out there on the two most key books, I think, that you need to get those books if you're going to have, if you're interested in UFOs, right? I'm sure people like him are very happy about this announcement. Okay, here, I'm going to continue reading here. It says, longtime researcher Barry Greenwood, who has collected historical information on UFOs from periodicals and other publicly available sources, as well as through the persistent and successful use of Freedom of Information Act requests over the course of several decades, emphasized the importance of having publicly accessible digitized records on UFOs. I think it's the culmination of efforts by a lot of people in the past, Greenwood told the debrief. If we make an effort to, say, scan the material and use it in different portions to different sites, it can be used all over the world. That's incredible, Greenwood added. I remember the days when we couldn't access anything much outside the United States and Canada. So this is a big deal. Echoing Greenwood's statements, Marler emphasized the critical importance of making historical records related to UFO investigations available to the public, as well as their centralization. We're at a very critical juncture right now as it relates to the UFO subject, but specifically UFO history, Marler said. We have a whole new era of legitimacy applied to the UFO subject that we've never had before, Marler adds, noting the involvement of government agencies like NASA, who only months ago announced that it would conduct its own study of UAP, as well as independent efforts by scientists and organizations who are taking the subject seriously. I'm not going to read the rest of it. I'll leave the rest of it so you can check it out for yourself. But I just want to talk about all of this. I think it's fantastic. I think it's fantastic that we're going to have this big database. And I'm sure a lot of this information will be made available online. I'm sure they'll have their own website and everything else. But it'd be a place I'd like to visit, once it's there. Of course, I would definitely love to visit a place like this. You'd probably spend months there just going through all the data, all the files, a lot of things you probably never even... I'm sure there's. I learn new things all the time about UFOs. You can never stop learning. There's different stories you hear all the time, and I'm sure, this. If you had a database like this, it would be like heaven on earth for people like me to be able to go into a place like that and dig through their files and see what they got. find out about cases I never heard of before. I mean, just every now and then I talk about, there's so many different cases, just for instance, there was an abduction case that I talked about on a podcast where some woman was abducted right in front of her friend. I can't think of the name right off the bat here, but I mean, I never heard of that. And then I read about it, and I saw it. It was on one of the UFO channels that I watch, UFO B or Eyes on Cinema, one of those. So then I looked into it, and I did my own podcast about it. I mean, there's just always new things you're learning about. And if you had it all in a centralized place like this, that would be great. I mean, the internet is filled with all different kinds of UFO data. You're searching all different periodicals. I actually subscribe right now to newspapers.com, and so I could go and check old newspapers right now on different UFO cases and stories that appeared in newspapers in the past. So that's, it would be great if you had a place like this where you probably, all the information you would need is all in one place. That would be awesome. And it's good news for, people interested in this. And it's important. UFO history is very, very important. I mean, the government, the United States government, they've been lying for years about this, and you need to have people out there exposing the truth, telling the truth, providing the true historical perspective on a lot of these UFO incidents over the years, which right now the government, for whatever reason, is incapable or of doing, or cannot do, or will not do for whatever reason. Why they keep still maintaining the secrecy? There's could be many reasons. But again, you need to have a good a place like this where you're going to have all these historical records stored in one place, and it's going to be like a place like it's going to be like heaven for UFO researchers. Let's put it that way. Probably anything you're going to want to find is going to be at this place, and that's good news for the future of UFOs.